name is Ottavio Arancio, and I'm an associate professor at Columbia University at the Taub Institute for Research on Alzheimer's Disease and the Aging Brain of Columbia University. The overall goal of the research in my lab is to find a therapy against Alzheimer's disease. It's a very general way of saying things. And to be more specific, we have different strategies in the lab to achieve this goal. So we are trying to approach it from different perspectives. And if I have to summarize these perspectives in a few words, I should say that in one kind of studies, we are trying to understand what is the function of a molecule that is called beta amyloid. And this is a molecule made by main amino acids. Once there are main amino acids together, those molecules are called peptides. Anyway, this beta amyloid, which is produced in very high amount in the brain of people with this disease, and is known also to be very toxic to the communication of the cells in the brain, and therefore to lead to memory impairment. But we know that this molecule is present in the brain of people throughout life, just normal healthy people, and it is there in very low amount. And nobody knew what was the function, if at all it had any function, this protein in this very low amount. What most of scientists thought was that it was a kind of piece of garbage in the brain of people with no relevance whatsoever. And instead, we have started working on it, and we have found that actually probably the very likely function of this protein in very low amount is just to be there to lead to normal memory. So without it, we cannot store information in the brain, we cannot learn, there will not be a normal memory. So, I mean, with all this study, what we think is that this molecule is there, it's necessary for memory, and then for some unknown reason, we start making people with the disease start making a lot of it. And the fact is a lot just makes the opposite of what it does in the normal brain. So it's actually, it reduces memory when it is there in a very high amount. And so this is a very, very interesting characteristic. And we think that actually until these studies were not there, what people were doing to understand the cause of the disease was just to look at the disease from the very end of it. Instead of trying to understand, it was a kind of a piece of a puzzle that is missing to understand to understand how something which is there becomes what is the beginning of the end for memory. So in other words, just to make things more simpler, because otherwise we get lost here, is that now we know that the normal function of this protein in very low amount of the brain is to lead to memories, that this molecule is necessary for memory. And we now need to understand how the problem starts, how memory is impaired. We need to understand how this normal regulation of the level of this protein in the brain is broken, and so the brain starts to make a lot of it. So we think that through these studies and through establishing what's the normal function of this protein, we could understand at the very beginning of the disease. And once you obviously understand how the disease starts, which is something which really we do not have it so far. What I found is that the normal function of this protein is there to lead to memory, the opposite of memory loss. So now I would like to understand, to bridge between the normal function of this protein, which is just to lead to memory, to its abnormal function, which is the memory loss. You see, so the fact that the protein gives to memory loss is something that was already known by scientists. It's slightly different. I don't want to take credit of something I did not discover. What I have discovered is that this protein in normal low concentration leads to memory. It leads to memory loss, the opposite, only when it is there in very high amount. And I would like to bridge the gap between its normal function and its pathological function, its bad function. How does a good guy turn into a bad guy? As a good protein turns into a bad protein? One of the biggest factors that can affect this is attention, for instance. I mean, if you do not pay attention to something, it's very unlikely that you will learn what you have, what you just saw. For instance, just to make an example, I bet that many people, many of us, remember what we did on September 11, because there was a coincidence. Just we paid particular attention to all what happened during that day. I bet that much less people will remember what happened the day before or 2 days before. So that's attention is very, very important. Another factor that it is very important would be motivation. If you don't care about doing something, you will not learn about it. If you are depressed or things like that, you will not learn what you just saw, what you just did. You will not memorize what you just did. Obviously, you need to be able to perceive the stimulus. If you cannot see, no way that you will remember. Or if you do not hear, you cannot remember words. So we need to be able to get to those things. This is our stuff that we help remembering. Obviously, those are not the only things, because we can monitor also through chemicals and through other ways, also memories. And hopefully in the future we'll be even better at that. So we can also stimulate memory chemically. What they do, they will work at the level of the synaptic connection. And since at the time of memory, there is a chain of chemical reaction at the level of the synapse, and by chemical reaction means a series of protein, enzyme, molecules are activated. What we do, we kind of force the system artificially through this chemical and through the knowledge of these chemicals to enhance memory. And we do this very well in animals, and hopefully we'll be able to do it in people as well. There are many chemicals that one can use to enhance memory, and there are many proteins that are relevant to the process of learning and memory. For instance, all chemicals that act on a particular gene by the name of CREB, that stimulate this gene, and they can do in several different ways, are all molecules that in animals work quite well at enhancing memory. They are available, but we can give an extra, additional amount. What we do with these chemicals, we take advantage of knowledge of what normally happens in nature, and we a little bit push in this. And in disease is even easier, because sometimes if in disease we find out that one of these chemicals is less in lower amount than what it would be normally, we just help the process by giving it artificially. With respect to that, I have to say that less than 5% of Alzheimer's disease are genetically transmitted. So 95% are not genetically transmitted. And generally speaking, the ones that are genetically transmitted, they tend to occur at earlier ages than, although this is not a general rule, but more often the people who have it because of genetic reasons, that 5% of the people, the population, they have it at the earlier ages. But it's only 5%, or less than 5%, about 5, that number. It's not that in China there is more than America or less, or in Europe there is more or less than here and there, but there are particular population that in particular circumstances that could lead to dementia, and because of the habits of those population. There are small groups of people. For instance, in the Pacific, there were population that used to eat the brain of the dead people, and then they were transferring disease, which one of the symptoms of this disease was dementia, and they were all developing dementia. So over there was a higher incidence of dementia just because of this habit of eating the brain of the people that were dead, and therefore, like an infectious disease, they were transferring the disease from one to, and there were a higher incidence of people affected disease. Once this was found and these habits were stopped, then the incidence of disease became the same as in other populations. In general, if you look at our society, there is not a population of people, or that is more affected by the loss of memory. It is a problem that hits with aging, so it's something related with aging, and so it's as we age, we get more memory, more memory problem. Obviously, not all the people are equal. There are some who have a better memory than others, and we do not know why some people have a better memory than others. I mean, we say that if we keep ourselves and our brain exercise just like a muscle, then we tend to have memory problems, less memory problems. So it's kind of protective, the activity or mental activity. Even some people think even physical activity, it could be protective against the memory loss, the loss of memory. That's what I have to say. Obviously, there are diseases which are associated. One of them, the most typical one, is Alzheimer's disease, which are associated with the loss of memory, and others, but are of less relevance, less. The characteristic symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, which is really hallmark of disease, is the loss of what we call short-term memory. So that's how the disease starts, actually. It's people who cannot remember what they just did, just as a very short-term memory loss. And that lasts for a very, very long time, and progressively the memory problem gets worse and worse. And only at very late stage of Alzheimer's disease, it's when also long-term memory is affected. But the major characteristic of Alzheimer's disease, which is a very widespread disease in the population, especially at old age, is the loss of short-term memory. The neurological process includes a series of chemical reactions at the level of the synapse, and this series of reactions leads to changes in the connection of the synapses, changes that include both the how to say, changes in the receptors that are located at the synapses, such that these receptors respond in a different way, and change in the release of neurotransmitter of the synapses, and eventually changes in the at the level of the morphology of the synapse, such that the synaptic response becomes much stronger. And even in addition to that, for this memory to last long, there have to be changes in the at the level of the genes that are part of our DNA and that are long-lasting. So there are genetic changes with the formation of new proteins in the cells that will leave its like sign, its change in over there as plastic changes, like as more protein and new proteins formed at the synapse. You see, memory passes through several processes, to several points. And first you memorize something, then you consolidate this something, then you can recall it when you need to remember, then you can reconsolidate it. It's a process which has several steps, several phases. Go. I bet that it depends on the particular moment in which you are trying to recall that memory, on certain processes that no longer happen in the brain, or they are blocked. Some chemical reaction occur and they interfere or do not occur and interfere with this process of recalling in a certain moment, and then one has the chance then to remember it. Maybe because you make an association with something in that moment that helps to, like, so if you associate something with a particular odor, I make just an example, and then that odor comes, then the memory comes up. It's just, those are tricks also to remember. Well, I mean, obviously, I bet that smell is much more important for a dog than for humans. Although there are humans who exercise their sense of smell, and therefore they're probably much better than I am to remember using smell. I mean, there is differences between senses and way of learning according to people, and we're not the same. It's like a door that some people is more open to one door than another, so they use in one particular way more than others. So there are differences. But if we accept the way in which the memory gets in, the chemical processes that once these things get activated, they are very, very similar inside the brain. They are very, very similar for different, we call input of memory, coming from different ways through different mechanisms. And they're very similar in humans, and they're very similar in between different animals. There are tricks that people use to learn, for instance, to store more numbers. There are ways. It's very important to be exercised at learning. I bet that relying too much on your notebook or your BlackBerry or whatever does not help in this direction, because we are confident that we do not need to learn. But because, as I said at the beginning, attention is very important. So if you do not pay enough attention because you write that kind of thing, then obviously you will learn less. So the secret would be just, I mean, obviously, if you repeat 10 times the same thing, you have more chances to learn it. Or if you use association within what you're learning with something else, and you store this association in the brain, then you will remember that particular thing better than others. So there are ways people use and to memorize, and then there are also I see difference between one person to the other. For instance, I'm very bad with remember numbers, but I'm much better with remember geographical names, location, etc. So I bet that people are better remember notes in music than others. Depends also what you like and what you don't like. Just because you pay more attention to what you like than to what you don't like. As I said before, the only thing that is sure is just to exercise your brain, and just like you do with the gym with your muscles, and that's for sure should help, because the brain, we have to see the brain also like an organ that has a reserve. So if we build up bigger reserve, then when disease will hit or the memory problem will start occurring, you will have more time to compensate for the problem. So diseases should be start later and slower, and just not that we will avoid the disease, but it's most likely, what we scientists think most likely happen is just we have more reserve in the brain. So that's for sure. I have to say also that although it needs to be confirmed, validated, and one cannot exclude that it will end up like with the aluminum story, people say that diet like the Mediterranean diet with the presence of antioxidants, this kind of stuff in your diet, they should protect and against problem like Alzheimer's disease, or be more protected, which does not mean again that it will not happen, but it will happen. There will be less incidence of Alzheimer's disease in this population, or a population that eat, for instance, fish. These studies, obviously, we have to be careful, because there are things showing it, but they might not be confirmed in the future. But that's what, the exercise and eating healthy helps not only memory, also other problems. Whatever you like to do, and it's not just you have to take it like a pill. Now I have to do 10 crossword puzzle, and instead of 5. It doesn't work like that. It's just to be involved with your life and being active, and not. Fortunately, when sometimes people become old, they tend to be less stressed out by life, and they tend to be depressed, so less involved, less interested. So that's the thing. It's just to be active, mentally active, and to be mentally active, I bet you need to like what you are doing. You cannot oblige yourself to be mentally active. I have to be mentally active. I don't think it works like that. It happens, and most likely you are storing things in the brain, and you are confusing probably your fantasy with the reality, and or you have one possibility. The other possibility, like you had the wrong perception of what you saw. So you store in a certain way because you are convinced that it's that way, but it was not that way. If, let's say, a stupid example, you're convinced that maybe you did not pay that much attention, and you're convinced that person was dressed in red instead was pink, or a color close to red, then you store the thing in that way. Obviously, with time, the memory, when it becomes more far away, certain aspects could disappear, and we could fill them with other aspects just to fill the gap. So we make up for the memory, and we build up the memory. At the time of recalling the memory, we are recalling stuff that occurred in other circumstances, because I mean, it's a memory. It's not, our brain is not a recorder like passive recording. It's a more active process. So being an active process, could be ways of changing it, because actively we can change it. So that's something which is important. It's not that our brain is like a tape recorder or a TV or a VCR. I mean, it's not. It's more active than that. And there are several steps in the process of memory and recalling a memory, which there are many, many steps, several steps. And each one of them has memory could be labile and could be changed into something else, distributed by something else. Because you have to look at memory as a process in which there are several steps, which they imply some, interference. It's not the right word. It's, processing of our brain of this information, and it's just purely active, and it's just changed. It's like when you change something from analog to digital, just to make one of those things, the video from the computer. And in that process of changing from analog to digital, you can change something and it will not be the same, What if you change a chip or something and you change the yellow into a green? So whatever was yellow will be green. Or A, when I say an A, you can even artificially change into a B if you want, because if you tell the computer to change all the A into a B, then everything will be a B. Or sometime during this process, some A will change into a B, then it will change. There's some activity, something that is there occurring, and it changes.